Okay, welcome to our second Amplify recruitment training program. I mentioned last week that this is the first time we've done this to start off a spring semester or winter quarter if you're go to quarter system school. So we're excited to have you back for a second session. Different content, different curriculum, and I have a few friends helping me today to assist with the training program today. Perfect. So my name's Dominic Green, Senior Director of Chapter Development for DU headquarters. I'm a graduate of the Oregon chapter, and I'll start from the top on down. So Hayden, if you want to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Hayden Ron, also member of the Oregon chapter, former staff member at headquarters, and currently work for Oregon Health and Science University in alumni engagement.
Perfect. Russ.
Hey guys, I'm Russell. I'm a leadership consultant on staff right now. I'm a graduate from the Boise State chapter.
Perfect. And Natalie.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Tate. I'm the creative specialist on staff, so I manage our digital communications, and I graduated from Butler University.
Fantastic. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get started. I'm gonna unshare my screen and turn it over to Natalie. We are going to start our program today specifically focusing on our social media efforts and what we can do.
Yes, you guys here. Join us in our phones.
Okay, if you could please mute yourself. Okay, that'd be fantastic. All right, Natalie, the floor is yours.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, can everyone see that, the recruitment toolkit?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so we are a two-person comms team here at DU. Along with my supervisor, Ashley, we have put together a recruitment toolkit, and it's just a gathering of some resources that'll help you to market yourselves effectively during your recruitment. So I'm going to briefly walk you through everything we put together here, as well as some great examples of using social media just to help you get ready for this season. It's super important to be marketing yourselves well, putting yourselves out there and making sure that everyone sees what your chapter is about. So starting us off, we have a social media guide. We have some main points here on the page, but you can also click onto here to see just a lengthier version of this. There's a lot of info on here, but it is really important. Some things I'll touch on now. I won't go through all of it. You can read it on your own time. But posting is so huge right now. Make sure you're posting at least twice a week. That is so important that people see that you're active. They can envision themselves in your chapter, see what their experience would look like. And one of the biggest things is that people join people. All the graphics you have with your recruitment schedule are really important, but it's also great to be building up your social media throughout the entire year, so people have more than just events listed out to look at when they're searching about you. So going off, I was talking about those recruitment graphics, and we have created some templates you can use on Canva. If you're not familiar with Canva, it is an online design tool where you can use templates or build your own. It's just really user-friendly and accessible for those who aren't skilled in graphic design or have a background in that. So we have instructions on how to use Canva here. If you're not familiar, you can look through those. But to access them, you click on this link here. And we've got a wide variety of options you can use. So we have a schedule, more in-depth posts about each event. Just trying to find a wide variety that will fit different social media, different aesthetics and themes. So you can scroll through these. There's also a few generic things about DU as a whole, about values, history, and testimonials are really important too. Also, I'll show some more examples of those later on, but they're a fun way to feature members, help PNMs get to know the members of your chapter. So to use these, you'll scroll to the one you want to use, and I won't open it up right now, but you click Use Template for New Design, not Edit Template, and that'll export it into your own Canva so you can edit on your own, make it chapter specific, and export it from there. Moving on, we also have flyers that you can edit. We have double-sided and single-sided depending on what printer you have access to, what your preference is for handing things out or posting around campus. So that is going to follow the same set of instructions as the social media ones. Just go ahead and click on that. Use template for new design, and you're good to go on those. Next, switching over to recruitment video. I love seeing all the recruitment videos come in because I use a lot of that footage, but it is tricky when sometimes something ends up in the video that shouldn't. You might have to get an email from a staff member. That's not fun for anyone. We want you to be able to keep your video up, not have to edit it. So clicking onto this is a few things of suggestions to include, things to avoid. So we have our fonts, colors, events that would be good to film, as well as stay away from any inappropriate gestures, inappropriate music, such like that. And we have some examples as well. All right, and then wrapping up the toolkit, we also have some items about our brand, so you can access that all here. And something fun we did is creating specific logos for each chapter. So if you want to have your own chapter specific branding, that is an option for you. So I'll click on to Iona here, and you can see that there's different versions of that logo that you can download, use on all your materials. The last little blurb on here is just to use our Delta Upsilon store. We work with our partners at Campus Inc. They're really great. They work along with us. They can use all of our branding and logos. So if you need any bulk orders, we recommend ordering through them. But if there's something that they don't have, there's a list of approved vendors. Does anyone have any questions thus far in the toolkit? All right. This here. I'm going to move on to just a couple examples of things I've seen this semester so far of really great social media. So starting off with Georgia Tech, they've had some fun posts that they kept to a theme. They had the same branding across a few posts that looked really great. It's just a fun way to use similar enough to DU colors, but still adding their own flair where they added the events they have. And then this spotlight is really great. It was a fun way to include pictures, show personality, elaborate a bit more on what the chapter is about. So they've got pictures, some facts about this member, more pictures, some quotes. That's a really great way to share your thoughts about the chapter, why you joined. And that's just a really good example of a spotlight there. So wanted to highlight Western Reserve chapter where they did, I'll zoom in a bit here, an overall schedule, as well as highlighting specific events. That was a great way to remind people that it's happening, not just having to refer back to the schedule, but it keeps it fresh in people's minds. And they also did a great job of including contact info on everything, ways to contact people, where the house is, and any other way they can get info. It's just an example of one of those event-specific graphics where they use DU colors in a fun way. These are more testimonials, and this is just another great way to get info across, help you get to know the chapter. And they wrote some really great blurbs about why they were chosen for Brother of the Month. And DePaul also does a Why Do You Wednesday. So that's you can make it a weekly basis, keep it consistent. People know that they're going to see that content from your chapter every week. And the final one I wanted to share was Purdue's. They have done a really great job of creating their whole account to be for recruitment. There's everything a potential new member could need on here. They have a schedule pinned, info about the house, scholarship info, philanthropy. So they've done a good job of being well-rounded. So those are just some great examples. We hope that you're all having a fun time with your social media, and make sure you're really utilizing that, because marketing on social media is one of the best tools you have. Someone hears your name on campus, your social media, specifically Instagram in college, is probably going to be the first place they go. So it's just super important to keep up with this. And Ashley and I are here. If you have any questions, you can always shoot us an email. We're happy to help with any branding or marketing you need. That's
Perfect.
all I've got. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
There's a question, Natalie, in the chat box about did the HTML codes recently change for our colors? So That might be a more technical question. I also dropped the website with the toolkit and the chat box. So if you have not seen it, but Natalie, is that something, can you answer quickly for Andrew about the?
They
I might-
shouldn't have changed recently. I'll go back and check, make sure those are consistent. Thank you.
Perfect. So yeah, drop the toolkit in the chat box. If you're just joining us, please remember to put your first name, last name, and chapter that you work with or go to school at in the chat box for attendance purposes. Thank you, Natalie. Please utilize our your social media. It's incredibly important as we're going through the recruitment process. That recruitment is really about telling our story and how important it is to portray what you're doing on a daily basis. We talked a lot about that last week, that recruitment really is storytelling, and also your recruitment events should really be a strong representation of what it's like to be in your chapter every week. So please remember, utilize social media, utilize our staff as well. If you have questions, Natalie is an incredibly great resource. And we're really lucky to have her. So, and the recruitment toolkit is someone who used to be in charge of all the marketing recruitment efforts way back in the day. This is fantastic. So thank you for that. So we're going to let Natalie go, but I appreciate you helping us, Natalie. And please, chapters, reach out to her if you need any assistance with graphic design or just direction of where to go. Perfect. All right, we're going to transition into our activity. So I mentioned this as an activity, and I'll let Hayden and Russell kind of chime in as well. We wanted to go off the conversation about branding and market, specifically about marketing and social media, but we can circle back a little bit to be able to say, like, what is your DU brand? Like, what are you trying to sell? Who are you as a chapter, right? So we talked a lot last week about what that looks like to get prepared for recruitment, about your recruitment events, about what you're known for, what do you do, right? So I'm going to ask the question, you can drop it in the chat box, but specifically we want to think about is, what is your brand in the recruitment context? So the corporate connection or the corporate context would be thinking about, if we're going to use a company like Apple, right? So if you're going to come up with one word to describe Apple, that could be, a lot of people might say innovative, right? People might say creative, some people might say expensive, right? Whatever you might say, but if you're going to come up with one word to describe Apple, so we're going to ask you for this particular activity. So think about what your chapters do you brand it. So if your specific chapter, so if you go to school at San Jose, Wisconsin, Missouri, in one word, what is your chapter's brand? So we want you to be consistent. We want you to be honest too. If it's nerds, if it's jocks, if it's bros, what is your brand? If you're going to, in one word, if you're going to describe your chapter or associate chapter or interest group, what would it be? So use the chat box right now. We want to hear from as many of you as possible. So just one word if that's going to describe your particular brand in the chapter. So I want everyone to participate. It's great. Brotherhood, home, diverse. Great. Seeing some good ones. So I want everyone to participate. So family, accepted, inclusion, belonging. Great. What else? Gimme, it's the boys. Fantastic. All right, so close, tight. Scroll through this. All right. Sorry, my box. Okay. Inclusive, together, determined. No, that's great. So thinking about this though too is when you come up with finding out what your brand is and how you would describe yourself, right? And the one word to describe your chapter, we want to make sure though that everyone is on the same page. So if you say you're inclusive, you say you're diverse, that everyone can define that, and they might have a different definition of what that looks like. Yes, I have Natalie's email, and we'll be on the last page when we wrap up today. So making sure though, when you're training your chapter, when you're talking about recruitment before you get started, to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So everyone might have, so I recommend doing this activity with your chapter, because you might come up with 30 different things, 20 different things, 50 different things, right? But we want to make sure though that when people are talking about specific words, how do we use those words to our benefit to describe what it's like to be in our chapter, to describe our brotherhood, to describe the experience they're going to get, Like what is, because a lot of times when we're talking about brand, it's really what outsiders, the outsiders experience with our brand, right? With our organization. So what does that look like? So making sure you're having that conversation. We can say we're inclusive, we can say we're diverse, we can say our brotherhood's tight, but what does that actually mean? And what are the stories, the examples that people can share to really describe that? Because we can say, you know, someone might say like, so why would I want to join the Wisconsin chapter? And they, from their perspective, then you need to be able to talk about that, because as we all know, recruitment, a lot of recruitment is storytelling, and be able to give examples and really positive examples to say, look, we're a growing organization, we're a growing chapter, that's fantastic, but what does that look like and what are we looking for, right? So this is something to think about. I would definitely do that if you've not started recruitment yet. It's a good way to get people thinking about how you describe the chapter and what is the current brand of where you go to school right now. So appreciate you all participating. If you have any other thoughts, feel free to put it in the chat box as well. So we're going to switch to
Hey, Dominic.
Yes. Yeah.
Real quick, I think, and going back to what Natalie just talked about, and I love seeing all the responses in the chat. I think what this also helps you do is really define what your social media can look like and how you market yourself. So if you're talking about diversity or growth, or I know at Oregon, when I was an undergrad, it was a lot about being active and being active on campus and active within clubs and organizations and in the community. So really being able to showcase that in both kind of what you're posting, but then also kind of who you're spotlighting and their kind of testimonial about the chapter as well. So it definitely helps in kind of tying in what Natalie had just talked about when it comes to social media.
Yeah, fantastic. You'd be able to use this, right? I think knowing who you are going into recruitment is really helpful, because if you guys are on 50 different pages about what is your chapter about, what are you trying to sell, then it creates a really inconsistent message for potential new members going through recruitment. Like, do you just care about sports? Do you just care about video games? What do you like doing? But a lot of your overall brand really can help you be able to capture and put that all in one specific box, to be able to really have everyone on the same page of what you're excited about and really what kind of experience are people going to get when they join your chapter. So perfect. Thank you, Hayden. Perfect. So what we're going to do, a quick reminder from last week, we talked about the 5-step recruitment model, right? We want to meet them, want to make them your friend. We want to introduce them to your friends. 4th step, introduce them to the fraternity. And 5th step, asking them to join. We mentioned this last week, that often people sometimes struggle with jumping from step 1 to step 4, where chapters also struggle is sometimes between steps 4 and 5, right? They've met them, they like these guys, they've been hanging out with these guys, they introduce them to their friends, introduce them to the fraternity, but sometimes chapters really struggle with, how do we get them to actually join, right? How do we ask them to join? How do we connect them? How do we, sometimes I think, as we all know, recruitment can be a little bit awkward, right? I think I mentioned last week that recruitment can often be the art of awkward man flirting, right? It's a little awkward at times. We're awkward, they're awkward, whatever that looks like, but often that creates some awkward moments. We want to make sure that we want to share some of our best practices that we've seen, but we've recognized this throughout the fall, that chapters are really struggling with how do we close the deal and how do we get them actually join Delta Upsilon. So I mentioned about that. So we're gonna talk more about this. How do we get them from introducing the fraternity to ask them to join? We mentioned before that the struggle sometimes is we jam DU down their throat 20 seconds after we meet them without getting to know them. So we want to make sure though, but when we get to the point where there seems to be mutual interest, how do we actually get them to join? So, sorry about that. So I wanted to talk about this, and this is where I'm going to have Russell and Hayden chime in as well. We want to talk about specifically, before we start talking about closing the deal, we want to talk about the membership selection process. We've seen some feedback we've gotten the last 2 years is how do we select members, right? We've met these people, but how do we make decisions on who is actually needing to bid? So we've seen a couple different ways of doing this. Sometimes it's the use of chapter brothers. Some chapters will have, and I put recruitment bylaws in here and bidding policies, procedures, because some chapters have overly complicated policies and procedures of how many people a potential member has to meet, that every single brother has to vote every night of recruitment. This could be 3-4 hour meetings that are exhausting about trying to figure out who's going to get a bid. Some chapters will use a recruitment committee or a group of valued brothers within the chapter to make the decisions, that they have executive decision making, and the chapter or associate chapter has given them the ability to figure that out. So I wanted to hear from Hayden and Russell about specifically like best practice, what you've seen about what's the best way to get over the hump from restrictive recruitment policies, and how do we make sure that chapters can streamline this process and not be so bogged down and have to, we have to meet every potential member 8 times, and he has to meet 80% of the brothers before we can even have a vote, and then the voting process takes 5 hours. So I'll start with you, Hayden, but Hayden and Russell, please chime in about kind of what you see best practices when it comes to the membership selection process.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dominic. Just a quick note, since I know there was a question in the chat. Thanks, Nico. And as I mentioned, we'll make sure to get that answered by the end of the webinar, talking about tabling. So if Dominic and Russell, you could also just keep in mind that question that we got, that'd be great. So in terms of membership selection, as Dominic said, in my experience, I've seen a lot of groups put too many restrictions on themselves in terms of the process to have the bidding process in order to get somebody to extend a bid to a potential new member, which ultimately results in that individual either thinking the chapter is not interested in them because they're taking so long in the process, or they ultimately join somewhere else because the process is taking so long. And I think for me, what I have seen the best chapters do within the membership selection process, and again, a lot of what we're seeing, or I've seen, it's well-intentioned, right? We want this guy to really fit into the chapter, and we want to make sure we're getting the right guys. And so I don't take this as somebody saying, oh, you're doing this and this is wrong. It can just be tweaked a little bit. And the best chapters that do it really focus on putting a lot of trust and emphasis within their vice president of recruitment and their recruitment committee. And so really utilizing them as the individuals who have been put in this position to make the decisions for the chapter. And obviously, if there are any worries about potential new members or any concerns, being kind of the individuals who hear those concerns and obviously have follow-up conversations, but ultimately those individuals are making a lot of those decisions and making sure that process is being efficient, effective, and in a quick manner. And so I know we have some chapters who really leave it all up to their recruitment committee. When I was an undergrad, it really was, the first step was, as a recruitment committee, we said, here are the guys that we want to bid. Let's take that to the chapter. Sent the names to the chapter. Hey, we have 24 hours to hear any concerns or any objections from guys. If we didn't hear any, we would go forth and extend bids to individuals. And so that allowed for our process to be very quick, but also allowed for us to hear any objections or any concerns from individuals who may have had a conversation or prior knowledge. And if they did, we would have those follow-up conversations. But our committee really took it to ourselves to say, hey, let's make these recommendations to the chapter, hear if the chapter has any concerns or objections instead of necessarily voting. And if we don't hear any, essentially that's saying all members are good with this. Russell, I'll turn it over to you to kind of hear your thoughts on what you've seen and what the Boise State chapter did as an undergrad. But I think for me, the best practices really come down to allowing for the recruitment committee to really have the ability to make those decisions, and then obviously share and make sure that process is running smooth.
So at one point, the Boise State chapter was, very small. And so it made sense to have a lot of input because there was really only enough people that would make up like a recruitment committee. But as the chapter grew, obviously it's not as efficient that way to get input from every member, all the time on every P&M. So I think making sure that the people who are in charge of the voting are people that are trusted by the rest of the chapter is going to be a big one. Making sure that they have the best interest of the chapter in mind. Sorry about that. And then also, like Hayden said, making sure that there's an avenue for input from the chapter in the case of, not necessarily in the case of, I think that this person would be a great fit, but in the case of, here's why I have concerns about this person. I went to high school with him and, blah, 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 stuff like that. So making sure that there is an avenue for, the chapter to be heard, but not necessarily needing the whole chapter's approval going into it.
I think it's important also to just have making sure that your membership selection conversations are constructive, that it doesn't become petty. I think what I have learned through the recruitment process is really we are not only are we selling the potential of where we want to take the chapter, but often recruitment is a lot about potential and seeing the potential in guys that you're recruiting, right? So it might not be, they might be a little awkward, right? They might not be the coolest person alive, but that person might have the potential and you're willing to see that. And I've seen a lot of chapters get bogged down in, well, I didn't like his shoes. I mean, I know this sounds very petty, but I've been part of membership selection meetings over the years with chapters where there are not constructive things on. This goes back to if you have a clear list of what you're looking for going in recruitment, and you have a clear these individuals that are going the recruitment that you want to give a bid to meet that criteria, is why not give them a shot? Why not give them a chance? Russell and I were talking earlier today that there are other steps down the way that if, as we talked about, you can give them a bid, and then what does that look like once they become an associate member, right? There are processes in place. You can check in with them. You can check in with chapter members to share concerns from there. But ultimately, it's really, like I said, there's no prescribed specific way to do membership selection. We want to make sure you're not getting too bogged down and that you're not having overly restrictive policies on how many people and what that looks like. When I was also obviously from Hayden's chapter. Back then, we just used a recruitment committee. We had faith. We trusted the people that we recruited, and people had input to give into the process, right? So if there was any red flags that came up, we were always able to bring that to the recruitment committee, and it was a very transparent process. But we wanted to make sure that didn't slow us down. And at the time I was from a fairly large chapter, and so whether you're a small chapter or a large chapter, being able to do whatever is best for you. But as Hayden said, sometimes there's ability to take a look at, especially if you're going into the recruitment process, to tweak things to make sure that you're not. There's no reason for chapters to talk about people for 6 hours in an evening, right? 4 hours, 6 hours. We hear about you might be like, that sounds ridiculous, but trust me, it's happening out there. So just something to think about. If you have questions about this, drop it in the chat and we can talk about it as well. We can move on to the next slide. I wanted to just talk about this. We want to specifically talk about closing the deal. We're not going to specifically sit here and show you how to give out a bid card, but we wanted to allow Russell and Hayden and myself to kind of talk about this. Is what does that look like to be able, before you're willing? So you talk. Let's say this: your recruitment committee has talked, and they have determined they're going to give out 15 bids, right? What does it look like to pre-close? So I'll talk about this, and I'll let Hayden and Russell chime in. Pre-closing is incredibly important. My chapter did this. We didn't even know there was a name for it, but we were doing this. Is what does it look like to gauge the interest of individuals going through recruitment and asking specific questions? So if before you give out a bid, it's okay to ask, be able to say, Russell, we are going to give you a bid, but at this point, before we can actually give you a bid, we want to check in with you. Where are you at right now? What's your interest level? But also, what's holding you back? What would be the reason you would say no right now if we gave you a bid? Is it, and being able to answer any questions? I think sometimes chapters skip this step and just make the assumption that everyone that they've been recruiting is going to accept a bid, right? But they failed to do some of the pre-close stuff to be able to specifically answer questions or hesitations or issues, right? So it might be something about their parents. It might be something about finances. It might be something about, they're concerned about getting Hays, whatever that might look like for you, but just something to think about from there. And I'm going to turn over to you, but other ways to pre-close or to be able to kind of gauge interest before you give out a bid.
So one of the ways I always did it on expansion, and then obviously when working with other chapters, was I always used the 1 to 10 scale, asking individuals. So I may look at Russell and say, hey, Russell, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being Hayden, no thank you whatsoever. I'm not interested in DU at all. 10 being, if you gave me a bid right now, I would accept on the spot. Where on that scale would you fall? Russell would respond, and it's going to give me a lot of information. If Russell responds with a 3, it gets me to know there's not a lot of interest there. Maybe it's best to mutually part ways, and Russell may want to go somewhere else, and that's totally fine. If Russell says a 10, man, that bid card's not coming out quick enough. I'm giving that bid. I'm making sure he signs that because he clearly wants to join, and clear if I'm asking the question. We're kind of, to Dominic's point, we're pre-closing. We have interest. Let's get this done. Let's get this deal done, essentially. the sweet spot really, and what you'll find a lot of the times is they're really in that 7, 8, even 9 range. And that's actually a really good place to then ask a lot of these follow-up questions that Dominic was talking about of what's preventing you from being at a 10? What's preventing you from being at an 8? What's preventing you from being at a 9? That allows for there to be some really good and healthy conversation with the P&M and understanding, is it finances? Is it time management? Is it academics? Is it they're hearing these other things about fraternities they're scared about, and then allowing for that conversation to happen in a really, really productive way. And then also that may be fairly early on, or, in a couple meetings, you can then have that same scale of interest. Dominic and I, or Russell and I, are talking, we address some of those concerns. He comes to, the next event. He goes to lunch with a couple of guys, and then the next time we talk, I'm going to ask Russell the same question. Hey, Russell, I know you were at a 7 the last time I asked this question. Where are you now? Russell now may say, I'm at a 9, 9.5. Great, right? Great opportunity to know, okay, what we are doing is working. Let's give him a bid at that point. And so it really allows for there to be intentional conversation, intentional questioning on your end in talking with the P&M. I've also learned through the expansion realm that sometimes guys are at 8s. You ask them what's preventing them from being at a 9 or a 10, and legitimately they don't know, right? Like everything's working out. And so you have the ability to say, great, here's a bid, we really want you. And sometimes that act of you saying, we want you to be a part of this brotherhood, actually takes them to the 10. Plenty of guys I've spoken with and I've recruited, I've done this scale of interest. They've been at a 7 or 8. They really don't know why they're not at a 9 or a 10. They give the, nothing ever gets 100% response. Okay, great. And then I give them the bid and it's like, yep, I'll accept right now, right? Like they kind of go, I don't know why I wasn't at a 10. And so it gives you a lot to work with as the recruiter, and a lot of follow-up there and a lot of intentionality. And it allows for you to really focus on, okay, what are the things that if they are at a 7 or if they are at an 8, what are the things we need to focus on to be intentional, to really show, hey, we're listening, we're addressing these issues, addressing these questions, and making sure that we're being intentional about that. Russell, anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I think another thing that it does is just it also allows them to know that you're interested. Sometimes P&Ms are going through recruitment, and sometimes there's just a miscommunication, and they might not know that you're planning on giving them a bid. They might not know that you're interested in them as a member joining DU. And also you might be the only chapter that's being real with them and telling them straight up, like, hey, we really like you. We think that you'd be a great fit here. And so even just in saying, where are you at on this scale, kind of gives them a little bit of, it boosts their ego a little bit in a good way. And yeah, I think that the scale is a great way. And the scale, the asking 1 to 10 works really well. If you're in a one-on-one setting with someone, sitting down talking about, them joining. It could also be as simple as just, at a recruitment event saying, hey, why are you here? What are you looking for? What are you liking? What are you not liking so much? And just, based off of their response, you're able to know kind of what areas to focus your conversation in, and what areas is going to be helpful to them when they're trying to make a decision on where to go and whether to join or not. So I think it just makes it really easy to be intentional about those conversations when you know exactly where they are in their headspace. And it's really easy to just ask them, and 9 times out of 10, they're willing to respond because, that's why they're around. That's why they're at your recruitment event, is because, that decision is for them, is on the table for them.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
we just go ahead. Yeah.
I just saw the comment. I don't know, Dominic, if you were going to mention that. Yeah, right. Like it's a great way to keep track of, hey, we're hearing finance pretty consistently. Like, do we need why might that be the case? We're hearing time management. So that's a great point there. It kind of keeps track. So making mental notes and putting those in the notes and talking about it with the recruitment committee and the executive team. I think the other piece is when you're doing these pre-close, you have these scales of interest. a big piece to it is how you're responding to some of those hesitations from the P&M. So if Dominic is expressing a hesitation, I need to really ask questions to better understand what Dominic is really understanding about that, right? So if Dominic is saying, hey, I'm really worried about time management, I don't know if I can handle, the load of being in a fraternity at this point, I'm probably going to sit there and ask, okay, what are you expecting when you join? Like, what is your idea or understanding of, if you were to join DU, how many hours is it really going to take? Because Dominic may say, hey, I am hearing from all these other guys I'm going through recruitment with that this is going to be the new member process is going to take up my entire life. I'm never going to be able to go to class, all of these things, when in reality, that's not going to be the case. And so it's just talking to Dominic through those pieces, and allowing for him to better understand what the actual time commitment is in joining the fraternity. So all that to say, if somebody's responding, take that deep breath and ask and respond, and really understanding where they're coming from, and asking those right follow-up questions. And again, it all goes back to being intentional, addressing the issue, building relationship. It's allowing for that P&M to feel seen, they're feeling heard, they're feeling like you actually care. That's going to go a long way in those conversations.
And I think just not making assumptions, I think it's a killer sometimes in the recruitment process, where you make assumptions. I go, he went to high school with Hayden, totally going to join. We don't have to put much effort into him, and we don't need to check in with him to see where he's at. And then guess what? He accepts a bid to your neighbors, right? So I think the assumption piece is key. One quick thing that mentioned on the slide is I think it's a best practice to make sure when you're having these conversations, you're doing things individually, splitting up friend groups. I know they all live on the same floor, but having these individual pre-close conversations with them, and not doing it as a group of 5, being like, hey, Hayden, Ryan, Russell, Tommy, John, like, are you all good? You're good. Okay. So how do you break these things up? How do you have these separate conversations with them and be able to just, I think environment's important too. So it's not in the middle of a loud recruitment tailgate, right? And there's music blasting, right? So making sure that you actually have the ability to answer questions, show them that you care, and put that personal touch on there. So real quick, we're gonna answer the questions about engagement and tabling in a second, but I saw a question come in about what if one of their hesitations is parents? I'll start this. I always happen to be the parent person in the chapter. If it's saying like, hey, my parents are hesitant, they don't want me to join. My parents were very, very hesitant to let me to join. I ended up having to wait a semester to join because my mom was so adamant that I needed to wait a semester, because I think her favorite show is 60 Minutes and 2020 and Dateline and all these other shows that sometimes portray some of the negative aspects of fraternity and sorority life. I think it's really important to have the conversations to see what they're specifically concerned about with parents. My chapter was really good about connecting the parents with alumni and or guys in the chapter who also had similar things. So I was president of my chapter, or super involved in the recruitment process, but I had no problem. Often guys who were parents were hesitant. I would talk to their parents, call their parents, talk to their parents in person if they happen to be close or local, to be able to walk through and really be able to answer the questions, but making sure you're answering the questions genuinely and not just acting like you're selling them, like, oh, you're worried about hazing? Don't worry about that. Like, answer their questions and making sure you really put some thought into it, and making sure. So you might know who the best people on your chapter to talk to parents are, but I do think alumni are a great resource in that. Also, other parents are a great resource. I know in our chapter, we had similar situations. My mom was a great resource for parents, a mom to call my mom, because my mom was very like, I didn't know about this. And then she became obviously a big fan of the fraternity. So connecting with alumni, other parents, being able to get the right people, talking to them to make sure, to figure out what the specific concerns are with the parents, and going from there. Hayden, do you have any other thoughts on the parent dynamic?
No, I think you hit that, Dominic. I also see from Scott, parent resources on the website are useful, right? Like assuring that they're going to the DU website, because there's a lot of good information there. I've seen chapters create parent handouts. Actually, at one of our expansions, we created a kind of parent one-sheeter that we would send to guys to say, hey, share this with your parents, because also what we are finding is the communication information that was coming from the student obviously sometimes gets lost in translation to the parent. And that's just normal, right? 18, 19-year-old, of course, there's going to be some lost in translation pieces. So the more resources the chapter can provide and just say, hey, send this to your parent. It's a kind of overview of who we are. Here's the contact information, is always helpful. There's resources on the DU website. Here's maybe the alumni president who'd be more than happy to take a call or an email. Here's an advisor that'd be more than happy to take a call or an email. Those can all help. And those, I know, and as Dominic says, was helpful when he was an undergrad. And we've also seen that in working with chapters and on expansions, that it kind of eases some of those parent concerns there. And I think too, the last thought is, if you have a shakier concerned parent, don't let's just say Dominic joining be the last time that parent is hearing from me, right? Or if I'm talking to that parent, like Dominic's mom better be getting updates. If she's calling or has a concern, it better go answered, right? Because then that's just showing, hey, we really cared, we heard, we know that you're concerned, we know you're a little weary about this decision. We're going to make sure that both Dominic is taken care of, but then also you continue to stay up to date and feel good about this decision as well.
I would also, it's not a bad idea in early on in the recruitment process, be able to say, like, when you're asking them, like, what are you looking for in a chapter? What kind of fraternity experience are you looking for? Things like that, to be able to ask, like, probably because I was sensitive to this because my mom and dad were like, absolutely not the first semester, is I would always ask them, like, hey, what are your parents thinking about this, right? Because often when you start getting to know them and start talking about connections, often family often comes up in, whether it be talking about family vacations, sibling dynamics, all of those things, right? So often the family comes up when you're getting to know a potential new member, but it's not a bad idea to ask them earlier in the process, as opposed to waiting until you give them a bid and then he's like, oh yeah, my parents don't want me to do this. I'm like, have you checked in with your parents? Because if someone's like, oh, I haven't really asked them yet, it's not a bad idea to get them to check in and then be able to answer those questions before you absolutely get the absolutely not, right? Because we've seen that happen before, where a parent puts their foot down and then realizing that we could have handled it earlier on if we had brought it up or had asked about that earlier in the process. So just something to think about. I can talk about parent stuff for hours, just because it was something that we dealt with a lot when I was in the chapter, but I've also had to deal with it as an advisor, but also having to deal with it as a university administrator as well. So perfect. All right, we're going to move on to the next step. So what we're going to do is an opportunity to, beyond formal recruitment, right? So, but beyond the next month, depending on when you're in, some of your chapters or schools don't have a formal recruitment process. So we totally acknowledge that. Some schools have a week. Maybe it might just be a week that IFC or the university's marketing recruitment. So, and in some schools, it's very structured. There's registration, there's recruitment groups. So whatever that looks like for you, we want to talk about, what does this look like beyond the formal recruitment process? We bring this up because quite often, and this has been my entire career, I've been a member now, I think in April it'll be 28 years, where often I've seen, when I've worked as an advisor or headquarters person, even as an undergrad, where when you're done with your formal process or at the beginning of the semester recruitment zone, that you're a recruitment area, that the VP recruitment or the recruitment team kind of just checks out. They're like, you know what, I recruited 10 guys, I'm done, I have nothing else to do. And that is where there's a problem. And Hayden Russell will chime in, but we want to get, especially if you're a brand new VP recruitment, we want you to view this as the long game. When we say 365, it does not mean you're giving out bids every day. Does not mean that you are, but recruitment can look differently for all of your chapters, or depending on where you go to school, but you're consistently looking for new prospects, working on people that might be coming to school next year, right? So we'll talk more about what that looks like. So we have broken up recruitment planning into zones. So 5 zones for most schools. If you're at a core system school like Washington, Oregon State, Cal Poly, there might be 6 zones for you. But what this looks like for you, there's a summer, an early fall, mid to late fall, but we're going to just talk about early spring and mid to late spring. If you've participated in a previous Amplify session, we have done a full training session on every zone. So we can definitely, and I think actually, if you look at the recruitment resources on the DU website, we do have previous training webinars on the full zone. So if you are a chapter that relies heavily on summer recruitment, we do talk more about summer recruitment and the fall early fall and mid to late fall are very similar characteristics to early spring and mid to late spring with a couple of different nuances there. But we just wanted to walk through, as now that you're in spring semester, I think at Michigan they call it winter semester, but whatever that looks like for you all, we wanted to at least talk about breaking up recruitment into zones to make recruitment more manageable, but also realizing that there's always a job to do throughout the year. I know we talked about last week about the role of the VP recruitment. My VP recruitment would heavily focus on our formal recruitment process. And then immediately, a big part of his job was consistently training. This is just an example, consistently training the guys we just recruited on recruitment skills, recruitment practices, so they could go out and talk to their friends in their classes, talk to their friends in their residence halls, talk to their friends in student organizations, to consistently have those guys bring their friends over to our house, right? But at the same time, though, we also, every week at chapter, he was actually doing many versions of recruitment training program. So we would actually so about every 2 or 3 weeks, we would actually have role playing at chapter to be able to talk through an issue where half the chapter were potential members, half the chapter were recruiters. And he would say, okay, let's talk about this question. My parents don't want me to join. And then we would actually role play and get everyone in the process of actually, how does everyone answer that question? Like, you know what, my mom doesn't want me to join. You know what I mean? So be able to, how do we respond to that? And we would allow everyone to kind of switch roles and then talk it through. But we spent 5-10 minutes at every chapter meeting practicing recruitment skills. Excuse me. So it's really important for us. So let's talk about this, what early to spring recruitment looks like. So that is right now, right? I'm going to let Hayden chime in on this in a second because I'm losing my voice. But what it looks like for you, we want to grow your names list. Who have you already recruited? Who have you already met in the fall? For some of you, your formal primary recruitment period is right now. So if you're a deferred recruitment school, we also kind of view it as deferred joining. Deferred joining means that you've been talking to these guys throughout the fall. You've been recruiting, doing the long game recruitment, but you've gotten to know these guys. You've met them, you made them their friends, introduced them to their friends, introduce them to the fraternity. So you've been able to do the 4 steps throughout the fall, if it's possible, and you're really just waiting for them to join or extend them the bid in the semester, right? So whatever that looks like for you, we're going to talk about referrals in a second. I have a specific slide for that. But what does it look like to train your guys, especially the people who have not been through recruitment before? So you might have recruited 20 guys in the fall. Guess what? They have not gone through recruitment on the other side before. So what are you doing to make sure those guys are prepared? Because sometimes your younger guys are the best recruiters, but they don't know what questions to ask. They don't know enough about the back end of running a fraternity. Do they know how much it costs? Do they know everything about the organization? Because they're going to be some of your best recruiters. But how have you done any kind of refresher training before school started or right before recruitment started? And a lot of that is event planning, budget prep planning. What does that look like? And creating your social media marketing plan. Hayden, what are other things they need to think about right now in the early spring semester recruitment zone?
I think you're thinking also about, do you have, and again, Dominic said we'll talk about referrals, but what list from the fall might you have that you can start working off of and having some conversations with guys? What are upcoming events tabling events that you can get involved with? So a lot of campuses may have a beginning of the semester student org fair, or a FSL fair, or some sort of tabling fair that not a lot of groups will necessarily take advantage of. But I've seen groups be really successful and chapters be really successful when they do take advantage of that. And so just trying to gather kind of what are those things that are happening on campus that we can get involved with. But to Dominic's point, a lot of it is training, it's skill building, it's coming to an Amplify DU, it's going back to your chapter and training, it's preparing lists of saying, hey, here are certain questions that we should be asking guys. Here's how to, follow up with questions. It's thinking through, and I think this goes back to one of the questions we had earlier in the chat. It's thinking through, how do we get our guys to be 100% engaged with recruitment, and what could potentially be everyone's role within recruitment as we look ahead, whether it be this semester or even the fall. And so this is a really important time to say, okay, here's the guys in my chapter. Here are the things we know will need to happen when we get to a recruitment period, or we know that's going to happen over the semester. where do you guys fit into that, right? Like, who are the guys that we know are going to be the connectors? Who are the guys that we know are going to be like the guys who really just need to show up to events? Who are the guys that we know we can take and kind of pluck for these Friday lunches that we might have with guys we're interested in, and start assigning some of those roles and really detailing out, like, what do those roles mean? Why are those roles important? So that when it comes time to communicate that with guys in the chapter, it's very clear on, hey, here are the different roles. Here's why they're important. Here's why we need you to stay 100% engaged. And I think what we've seen, and Dominic and Russell, correct me if I'm wrong, is that when that's communicated in that way, and when chapters take the time to very clearly define what those roles are within the chapter and why they're important, they're seeing an increase in membership engagement within recruitment, because guys understand why they need to be there. They just don't think, hey, I'm being asked to be here and I don't want to be at recruitment. I'd rather be, watching the Blazers game. You don't want to be watching the Blazers right now, so that's not a huge issue. But you really are thinking about, hey, instead of just they're asking me to be there and it just feels like an obligation, it's now, hey, they took the time and effort back in early spring to really think through what this chapter needs and how I can be a part of that. Hey, I feel that obligation, and there's clearly an emphasis on recruitment going on.
Right. Russ, anything else you would add?
Covered that pretty well.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to switch over to, all right, so we're going to transition. So remember, you're done with your formal kind of process, or you recruited your class and they've started associate member education. What are the next steps? Remember, I said before, does not mean your job is done, does not mean you have nothing else to do the rest of the semester. As we mentioned before, you want to make sure, so March, April, May, June for the quarter system schools. We also want you to continue to build your names list too. What does it look like to continue to engage guys? Because some of the guys you're still recruiting, and depending on your campus, we realize that some schools have initiation deadlines, but they don't necessarily have restrictions. They might have restrictions on how long your associate member class, your associate member process could last, but it does not mean that they're going to restrict. Some chapters have had two classes in a semester. That might sound a little ridiculous to you, but we've had some chapters do it successfully to be able to run, one group started in January, another group started in February. So they're, 3 weeks ahead of the other group, but there are still some activities you all do together. Whatever that looks like for you all, you can start doing that. The big thing for you as well is we want you to start planning for next year, right? So who is coming to your school next year, and start building your names list for fall 2024. Where some of you, that might sound ridiculous, but this is what happens when students are coming to preview days, admitted student days. And for a lot of your campuses, people potentially have already done early admit. So you already can start building your names list for next fall. Be able to say, like, who do you know who's coming to Nebraska next year? Who do we know that's coming to Georgia Tech next year? What does that look like? And start building those names. So as VP recruitment or recruitment committee can start managing that list for the following year. You can have a current year list and a next year's list. But what does that look like for who's coming to campus next year? And that means being very intentional about, especially if you have a facility, if you have this ability to start when people are in late March, you've gotten into 5 schools. Mom and dad are going to take you to different schools to kind of finalize everything. You're going to go to Oklahoma. You're going to go to Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas, University of Texas, Arlington, and Missouri, right? You're trying to figure out where you want to go and what that looks like. So, but if you know these people that are coming, there might be from your high school, you might have played soccer with them, you might have been in the same volleyball league growing up, whatever that looks like, you might have known them from summer camp, right? Whatever that looks like, connect with them and say, hey, when you come to campus for preview day and mid-student day, stop by the house, give them a tour, take them to lunch, meet their parents, whatever that looks like. This is where you can also engage them early, even before they've been admitted to the school. But that sometimes is the first impression stuff that will last for them, right? You made that extra step, you made it personalized, you can meet mom and dad or whoever else, who their guardians, whoever they're, or dad and dad, whatever that looks like, meet them and actually get to know them, to be able to say, like, this is where, hey, we're interested, connect with us, we'll keep you engaged throughout the summer. And then you can, and then obviously it makes it much easier because they already have a name with a face, because one of your guys from your chapter went to high school with them. They already have a connection, and that's an easy potentially potential add to your chapter in the fall. So just think about that. I was a product of this. I was a product of summer recruitment. I signed up for recruitment at a summer orientation program. I got added to the list. I started getting recruited. So that would be the next zone. But a lot of the guys in my chapter, and especially depending on where you go to school, we have chapters like Nebraska, Kansas State, University of Washington that do a great job that have to start recruiting in January once they know people are coming to their school. So there's opportunities there to connect with people, even if it is a simple house tour, even if it's just sending them information about the organization, whatever that looks like for you, is starting to already plan mid spring is where Brother's going to be throughout the summer. How can you connect with potential new members throughout the summer? What does it look like if you have a budget to do anything over the summer, if it's possible? Some of your schools might say absolutely not, but what does it look like to be able to start planning for the guys coming in the fall, which is for some of you might be like, I've never even thought about that, but there's plenty of opportunities to start engaging people before they come to campus. So it makes your job, once again, much easier once they actually get to campus, be able to say, actually, I've already met some Ds. Because honestly, it was much easier for me. I went through summer recruitment. My parents said absolutely not, but the chapter that made that lasting impact on me, I can still remember that conversation from a really long time ago when our recruitment chair called me when I was in Hawaii with my dad and talked my ear off and convinced me to at least come to one of their events and it locked me in, right? But I still remember that conversation because the chapters took the time and energy to actually connect with me because I had signed up for recruitment at an orientation session. Hayden or Russell, do you want to talk about anything from mid to late spring about prepping for next year?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is what you all have probably seen. I know Russell has experience with this. This is around the time where you start seeing class of 20 whatever pages get created, and some campuses have this where they start introducing or they're allowing guys to introduce themselves as either they are committed to Nebraska or Nebraska's on the short list, and you can reach out to social media and it's a simple message and not even a push DU, but really a, hey, congratulations on, committing to Nebraska. Let us know if you need anything. We'll have some guys around in the summer, or if you need anything, reach out to us, right? Like just that friendly face, because what we all know is, and we've all been there, is as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, especially coming into a new place, we want to find community, we want to find belonging, and so it's really hard as an 18-year-old to do that outreach initially. And so if you're genuinely getting that from a fraternity, that can go a long way, right? Similar to Dominic's, it went a long way that somebody took the time to call me in Hawaii, talk my ear off, and why I didn't join. It made a lasting impression. And I'm sure Dominic felt like, hey, like I feel like I would belong there. And that felt really good. And I didn't get that necessarily as much anywhere else. And so just some of those things to think about. I think Dominic's point, some chapters do this phenomenal, right? They know where guys are going to be for internships. They know where guys are going to be living. They know where guys are from. And so they have assigned recruitment chairs within those regions. And those are the guys that are going to lunch with guys in that area. They're the ones who are the connectors. Hey, we're going to have a top golf event in Bend over the summer. And so if you're going to Oregon State, the Oregon State chapter is going to have an event in Bend. And we have, while the VP of recruitment might not be there, we know our recruitment chairs, our couple of recruitment chairs in the Bend area can lead that. And so March, April, May is a great time to prep for all of that and really prep for what does that actually mean. And our chapters that do it well, they do it well and they recruit well because they take the time to do all that preparation leading into the summer.
Absolutely. And like I said, sometimes the long game is getting people who are current freshmen who said, you know what, it's already end of February. I don't think I want to join now, but I'm very interested in joining as a sophomore. Fantastic. You want to continue to keep those people interested, invite them to things. What does it look like to keep them interested throughout the semester? So a lot of the VP recruitment's job, the recruitment committee's job, is to the follow-up piece and the engagement piece so we don't lose them, right? That is something that, like we love this guy, and you know what, I feel very confident that we can get him to join in the fall, but let's keep him engaged, because just because he says not right now doesn't mean you're not going to get him, because I've seen some fantastic people join as sophomores or even transfer students, whatever that looks like. So one of the things for the early spring zone as well is making sure you're checking in on transfer students. And I mentioned this before, but there might be some specific opportunities to engage transfer students or people who took fall semester off. A lot of universities, we've seen this, they're allowing people to take a gap semester before they start college. So their first semester in college might actually be this semester. We're talking about in January 2024. So connect with the Fraternity and Sorority Life Office. There might be some opportunities because those people might want immediate engagement opportunities, involvement opportunities, because they're joining mid-year and a lot of people have already found their friends, right? So what's the best way to engage on a college campus? To join DU, right? So how do we connect with those people as well? Russ, anything else from your end? Or Hayden, sorry. Anyone? Russ?
I did have one extra piece because I think it's important, and I think some chapters that we saw, Dominic and I have a story of seeing this work really well, is this is a really good time to keep your ear out. You don't necessarily have to be fully active in this, but keep your ear out of guys who may have joined another organization that you really like, that you still have a good relationship with, that you may hear dropped that organization for whatever reason. So I will always bring up this example because I think it speaks to successes in recruitment. So Dominic and I were on an expansion. There was actually a DU legacy who we were talking to, phenomenal individual. Obviously with an expansion, there comes a lot of hesitation just because it's a new organization on campus. He ended up joining somewhere else. Not a problem. That's the fit that he wanted. We kept a good relationship with him. We'd see him on campus. Different staff members would. Mid-semester, we're continuing to recruit, but we get a message from him saying, hey, it didn't work out. Had a really bad new member experience. I dropped. His DU still open? Like, can we have a conversation? Of course, right? Like this is a great message to get from this individual. End up having a conversation, addressing some concerns, now different concerns based off his experience. Obviously, he ends up wanting to join. We provide him a bid. He ends up getting on the executive board, becoming chapter president, getting the group to charter. Like, it was because we kind of kept that ear out, kept that relationship, and didn't just say, oh, by middle of the semester, we're done recruiting, or you've already gone. Like, we kept just kind of a close ear on that. And so this is sometimes a good time to gauge that. Again, you're not actively asking every single guy, hey, how are you liking your experience? How are you doing this? But definitely keeping that ear out, because you never know. There might be a guy who just didn't like their experience for whatever reason, but they still want that fraternal experience, and DU can kind of be that bridge for them. And this is a good time to kind of keep your ear out there.
Perfect. And I'll make a commitment right now that we'll do a summer we'll do a program sometime this semester, probably closer to March or April, to be able to talk about prepping and planning for summer recruitment. So if you have interest or engaging, and what does it look like to start doing summer engagement in programming in recruitment, we can talk about just strategy. So we'll do a quicker Amplify session to talk about summer recruitment sometime in March. So just a little preview there, because I think there's enough of chapters that might be interested in at least what does a 30-40% engagement look like, to at least engage with people are coming to campus next year. So perfect. All right, so we talked about this. So recruitment names in practice. I think it's important for you. Sorry, there's some slides that somehow made it in here. Just quick reminders of what does that look like to build the names list. It is consistent engagement, right? What does it look like with relationship building with people you might know, and what does that look like from there? I think it's really important. Hayden, we can talk about referrals right now too. Is engaging in 365 is engaging alumni. So we want to engage three different constituents. We want to engage under your current brothers. We want to engage alumni, and we want to engage your friends. When I say friends, so current brothers makes sense, right? We've talked about this. Who do they know from their high school? Like, it doesn't mean they have to be friends with these guys, but if you know people that went to your high school, or people that you grew up with, people you played sports with, people you were on, quiz bowl with, and you know them from the rival high school, get their names, right? They're like, hey, I know that guy. We'll add him to the names list. What does that look like from there? Alumni is something that I think is often underutilized, and we have some examples that I could send out to you also. If there are alumni on this call that want to see a sample alumni referral form, a simple form that you can send out to all your alumni to say, do you know people that are coming to campus next year that might be great potential new members? So that could be, doesn't have to be blood relatives, right? It could be next door neighbors. It could be someone, your law partner's son is going to Wisconsin next year. Whatever that looks like is how do we send potential names to the chapter to allow the chapter to engage with those folks. The other one could be friends. So this could be loved ones, people you're dating, guys in the chapters, partners, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it looks like, who have younger brothers, who have friends who go to that school. Whatever that looks like, it's okay to ask your friends for and get, like I said, if the chapter is built up a good enough brand and have a good enough reputation on campus, people should want to send names of being like, you know what, my brother might not be the fraternity type, but I think you guys would really like him. We used to always say, give us his name, right? Even if he is probably a 10%er about joining a fraternity, we wanted to meet the guy, take him out to lunch, get to know the guy, right? And just be able to gauge kind of what he's looking for, what he wants to do when he gets to campus, because I think those are opportunities though, but we need names, right? So this is a great opportunity for you all, and you shouldn't just be doing this mid to late spring. This should be something you can should consistently have open channels to ask your alumni, to make sure brothers are brainstorming, seeing things on social. Nowadays, it's so much easier to see on social media, right? To see on Snapchat, to see on TikTok, to see on Instagram, like, hey, I'm coming to Nebraska next year, to be able to be like, hey, I know that guy, and add him to the names list. So anything else, Hayden, from a referral standpoint, we just want to make sure that you're engaging with these people and not understanding it's not awkward to ask for who do you know that you think would be a good fit for the chapter, right? Don't feel awkward to ask that question.
Yeah. No, Dominic, I think you covered pretty much all of it. I will mention tabling here because I know that question was asked earlier. Obviously, tabling is a great 365 recruitment practice if your campus allows for you to table on different areas of campus. Tabling is not easy. I'm not going to lie to anyone. It's not easy, and it's not necessarily the most fun, but there are definitely ways you can make it fun to attract individuals. I think a lot of times people think, hey, if I just put a table out, I put a DU flag and I sit behind the table, like that's going to get the job done. That's, as most people see or experience, that's not going to get the job done on a campus. People are going to walk right by it. They're either walking to class or they have something else on their mind. What you need to do to really attract people to have those conversations is you need to be standing. You need to make the table kind of appealing. You have to allow for there to be some sort of activity is always fun. So whether that is a wheel and you buy a bunch of candy and maybe something else, and they spin the wheel and they can get something. And while you're doing it, you're having a conversation with them, or you're having a conversation with somebody who could potentially recommend somebody, right? Good opportunity to talk. We've done it where on an expansion, there's an upcoming football game or a basketball game. Hey, guess the score. If you guess the score correctly, or the person who guesses the score, the closest to guessing the score is going to receive a $25 Chipotle gift card, right? That $25 is coming out of the recruitment budget, but you're gathering names, you're gathering contact information, you're bringing people in, you're talking to people. We used to table in the winter and in the kind of springish time. And so in the winter, we'd have hot chocolate, right? We'd be passing out hot chocolate, again, opportunity to talk to people. It would bring them in. And then in the spring, it'd be like lemonade or some, Kool-Aid or some sort of drink that's going to like cool them off a little bit, but it attracted people in. And then once they're at the table, if you've got the right guys there, they can talk to guys, get numbers down, really sell that experience, or saying, hey, we've got a recruitment event coming up, or hey, I'd love to take you out to lunch, or hey, we actually have a group of us going to the gym. Do you want to join us? Right. But it's really about just having some sort of activity. Yeah. Ice pop's great. Yeah. That's a great recommendation. Something that's going to bring people in, and it's not necessarily just bringing guys in. Obviously that's great, but it's also just bringing a plethora of individuals. And it's really, once they're there, do you have the right individuals, kind of those guys whose strength is, I can be quick, I can talk, I can get guys interested, I can get the word out to DU, I can get their contact information, and then we can follow up from there, is the best probably practices that I've seen for tabling. Dominic or Russell, anything to add? on the tabling aspect. Russell, anything to add for 365 recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, on the tabling aspect, I just say like people love free stuff. And so if you have like a little handout, like a flyer pairs really well with really anything you're handing out. When we're doing expansion work, we have these little quarter sheets that have a QR code to our interest form. And even just handing that out with like a Red Bull or a Celsius or a bag of chips, granola bars, whatever it is, like free stuff people usually say yes to. And when you're giving them something, they're more willing to also, take a promotional flyer. Yeah, Saul.
Sorry, I have to unmute myself. How do you justify getting a bigger budget to the rest of the chapter?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, recruitment is a numbers game. And so the more people that you're able to, get the word out to, is a really important consideration in how many people actually coming out to events and end up joining. And so it's just more of a marketing kind of thing. And if you want to be successful in marketing, sometimes it comes with a bigger budget. And so justifying that to the rest of the chapter could be as simple as just saying, hey guys, we want to market better. We want to be more successful in getting our name out there. And we're going to need to spend a little money in order to have an increase in revenue in dues. And be able to do more fun stuff. It's really, if you look at it that way, it can be just an investment in the size of your chapter and the experience that everyone's getting.
Especially to spend money to make money, which means like to increase the size of the chapter, which also then brings in more revenue, right? So I think we've talked about marketing, and that's always tends to be one of the biggest issues of the chapter of just nowadays, depending on the college campus, depending where you go to school. Some schools, we realize that recruitment numbers are drastically increasing, but for a lot of schools, there's not seem to be people rushing to your events, rushing to your tables, rushing to your chapter facilities, right? So we need to do things outside the box, right? To be able to get to these people, go to them. What does it look like to market to them? What does it look like to table where the freshmen live? Where does it look like the table in front of where freshmen eat on campus, right? How do we make sure we're actually engaging them in the tabling process? The amount of times I've been to tabling events where I see other chapters where they're literally sitting behind the table on their laptops, not looking up at all, right? Not talking to anyone. And you're like, this is not great, right? And they're just not. So how can we actually get out there and do some and be able to actually engage with them? So we'll talk more about that. If you have specific questions about tabling, something Russ and I can stick around at the end. If you just want to talk through specific issues or whatnot, I know we did that last week as well. So let's get through. We only have a couple more quick slides. I did want to, at this point, wanted to talk about the portal. We have a names list tool that is available now on the portal that will allow you to, and all right, you can see this. I'm sharing, if there's anyone from Arlington here, hello, Garrett. I'm impersonating you. So on the DU portal, this is a simple tool that was designed, that was added in here. So for many of you, it's portal.ltu.org. Very simple for advisors. The way this works is that everyone in the chapter has access to the recruitment portal. So there's specific tabs on here that are only available to the VP Finance, VP Admin, VP Membership Education, VP Recruitment, and Chapter President. But the recruitment tool is a tool that is open to everyone in the chapter. And what it is, for previously, a lot of your chapters will use Google spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets, whatever it looks like, to track names, right? So I know for a lot of chapters I've worked with, they've had some kind of Google form, like, hey, I met someone in class. I'm just going to fill out this form. It'll go straight to the Google form, and that builds your names list. Great. But some chapters don't even have a names list. They kind of just, they fly by the seat of their pants and be like, if we meet someone at an event, yeah, we'll invite them to something, but you're not really organizing it. This gives you the ability to organize this. So what this looks like in the portal is pretty simple. What I'll tell you there's a couple different tools out there. There's a couple different companies that also do specific recruitment tools. I'll use Chapter Builder. Is a product that is owned by Fired Up or Technify. They have a tool as well. This is just a free resource. If your IFC provides you Chapter Builder or a specific kind of recruitment tool that looks like this, you can use that. Please use that. this is just a way for people to connect with this. It also makes it easy because what you can do is you can also, it's much easier to report associate members when you do this, right? So here we have the ability to go in here, and CJ, I'm going to have you talk us through what's the best way to add people to this list.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you are, if you're coming back from a tabling event, you have a list of, let's say, 10 guys. If you want to go back, Dominic, I think the easiest way to add 10 guys is to click on this button on the right that says add potential new members. Yep. And you can come in here and add a bulk entry. So you can come in, literally list out all 10 email addresses, phone numbers, all that good stuff. And you can add them in here. But, let's just say, I'm just a regular member of the chapter. I had, economics class earlier today, and I met this freshman that I was really interested in. Clicking on any of those little people with the plus next to it is going to be the best way to come in and add in just like a single entry to let, you as VP of recruitment or maybe chapter presidents or who else on the recruitment team know, like, hey, I found this guy, or I met this guy earlier today. I put him into the portal, if you want to go take a look and see about reaching out to him and setting him up with, someone on the recruitment team.
Perfect. So I just added Hayden's name. What we can do, you add Hayden. I think the one quick thing though, before I go back to what you were mentioning before, I think also if you have an IFC recruitment process or people that you've engaged through IFC recruitment process, you can also, it might be providing you with your own lists as well. You can also copy and paste them and drop them into here as well. So it's a way for you, if you're already managing and you're like, okay, we have access to this list, but we need to put this into our own system to do that as well. I added Hayden to this process. We just met Hayden as that example, right? So CJ, walk me through. So when we add Hayden, because I met Hayden in class, what do I do next?
Yeah. If you met Hayden in class, you'll want to let the VP of recruitment know, obviously that's you guys. Then you can go ahead and move Hayden to, you reach out to Hayden. So you move him over to PNM contact and say, hey, we have this event on Tuesday. Love it if you can make it. We'll come pick you up if you need a ride. Then once Hayden comes, guys are interacting with him, having good conversations. You can once again move him over to PNM engaged. And while you're moving him along the process, along the timeline, everyone in the chapter can see, okay, Hayden has been around, maybe I haven't talked with him yet, but at least, this is a guy who has been around. People have been engaging with him and having these conversations. And ultimately, once we feel, Hayden's a good fit, Hayden is interested in joining us, we can go ahead and move him over to bids offered. And if he accepts, that's how we go on to report him as an associate member of the chapter.
Absolutely. So that new report button, you do need contact information for that person. So ideally at that point, if you're going to offer him bid, you should know what his email and phone number is. This makes your job significantly easier to hit report because you don't need to fill out a separate form through IHQ to be able to report it. You can report them this way. I will say using the decline tab, if Hayden's like, you know what, I'm going to wait. But I'm still pretty interested. I'm at a 6 or 7, but I need to get my parents to figure this out. Or you know what, I need to get a job this summer so I can afford to pay for the fraternity. You can put Hayden in the decline tab. You don't have to clear this out, especially if you know that Hayden is still someone that we might need to get engaged. And if you connect with Hayden and Hayden goes, you know what, I'm still interested. I declined right now. As the VP recruitment, you can then go back and move Hayden back to someone back into the PNM contacted, right? So whatever that looks like for you, wherever he is, contacted usually means you've made contact with him, you've texted the person. There's also the ability to, right, CJ, that you can add notes to this as well, right?
Yep. Yeah, if you just go down and click on update tags, you can go in and, let's just say, you can see like for Kobe, right? Like Kobe is a biology major for Arlington. So you can put in people's majors, you can put in their hometown. If you have a recruitment committee and you're kind of divvying out PNMs to different people on the committee, you can put in that person's name to help them understand, like, you are in charge of reaching out to them and kind of organizing that way. Any interest, really anything that could help spark a conversation when you're at a recruitment event. That way, everyone in the chapter can say, Hayden loves soccer. Oh, Bailey in the chapter is a big soccer guy. Like, let's make sure that these two connect and have a conversation at some point during this recruitment event.
keeping notes on guys in your old names list, you might have had an opportunity to also put. So I put Ryan Johnson here. Ryan knows Hayden from high school or from some other things. So you can put a tag in here and tag everyone that knows Ryan, right? Because sometimes it makes it easier. Sometimes those personal touches of knowing how you or what connection, small world connection you might make, right? So Hayden might also be the younger brother of someone that you're also like she's a friend on your campus, right? So Sarah, Ron, right? Put this on there. Hayden is also Sarah's younger brother. Everyone in the chapter knows Sarah because she's her sweetheart, right? So it's like making those small world connections, putting all those notes in here to get you to remember who these people are. It's possible that you might have just met 300 people coming through your door because you have a formal structured IFC recruitment process. Some of these individual notes will help people remember who they talk to, what that looks like, and go from there. So just some tags there that you can be able to keep in there. And so when I click out of that, it's Houston, soccer student government, Ryan, who knows Hayden, and then it's Hayden's older sister. Tags stay on there, so you can continue to add tabs, take tabs off, but it's a good opportunity. And you just click on the little 3 dots, and you can update tags, either delete things or add things as we go along. Other things I might be missing? Okay.
No, I think you covered it.
Perfect. So once again, if you go to the when you log into the portal, any of you have access to this. So if you're here's the thing, I will tell you this: we have a lot of people in DU who have not activated or claimed their portal account. So if you have them go in and look for an email from the DU portal to activate their account, that way they can log in. Depending on what role they have, Garrett has more access because he's chapter president. He has access to the roster, the roles, things like that. Some of you might just have recruitment, virtual programs, a couple other things. So this might look a little bit differently, but ultimately the recruitment tab is what's going to help you be able to add that. Let me just double check if we have any questions. Oh, sorry about that. I'm like, what am I doing? Okay. Questions. Oh, okay. So perfect. We'll go from there. All right. If you have any other questions, and then we have a couple more slides for you all, and then we will get out of here. Thank you for sticking around. Okay, so real quick, I'm just going to do a one quick last push. Train the Trainer recruitment skills video. I mentioned before, we've talked a lot about recruitment skills building and getting guys prepared, what to talk about, brotherhood building, who we are in the chapter, having people feel comfortable in the recruitment process, right? I would say to make the recruitment process feel less awkward. So practicing all those things. There's a sample facilitator guide and sample slides that you can use for that. Here's everyone's email addresses. Wanted to put them on there. So Natalie's email is tate@deltu.org. And then Hayden is a great resource as well. So feel free to take a screenshot of this and we can go from there. So I did want to double check. I wanted to talk, the last question was about general member engagement. Hayden mentioned before about giving people specific roles. I also think it's important to have, when you're discussing, we mentioned this last week, and I think I talked about this at the very end, is when you talk about who are your best recruiters. Often your best recruiters might be people that are not super, there might be former exec board members, might be guys who are seniors who've never been on exec, but are just good recruiters. But sometimes recruitment is a lot about individual connections, individual reach outs. How do you get them to connect with recruitment and actually say, hey, you know what, CJ, I know recruitment is not your favorite thing in the world because you think you're too old for this, but CJ will be like, oh, come on. No, I like recruitment. I just feel like I'm too old. I'm like, wow, you're 1 year old. You're 2 years older than these guys. You're not that old, right? But I'll be like, CJ, look, you're one of the best recruiters in the chapter. Can I make sure you come to specific events, right? So what are the best events for your guys to engage with? I know for our chapter, we used to do a really good job of engaging upperclassmen, juniors and seniors, and to make sure our recruitment team would make sure that they're engaging with them and also use them for a lot of the follow-up pieces, right? So they might not be at all the barbecues and some of the poker tournament, but any kind of follow-up. So in between the barbecue and the poker tournament, you might invite guys to coffee. You might go take guys out to lunch, just meet them at the residence halls, meet them at the dining halls. And whatever that looks like is bringing some of your upperclassmen with you, right? So that was something I did a lot when I was chapter president. I was a senior. I was super involved in campus, also just trying to find a job and trying to get out. But I also know our recruitment chair was like, look, Dominic, this guy is a mini version of you. He's involved in student government. He swam in high school, did all the things like he wants to be you. in 2 years, right? And I'm like, and I'm like, all right, great. So I went to lunch with this guy and a recruitment chair, he ended up joining, right? So, but it was something that I was able to share my DU experience and why I joined DU, right? Why DU was still important to me and be able to close the deal, right? Because I was able to share my story, and everyone in the chapter should be able to share their story. So this is why it's important that you get people trained to be able to do this. But member engagement is a lot of, sometimes you have to send out texts. Sometimes you have to ask the guy in person. He comes to chapter meeting and be like, hey, can I talk to you after recruitment, and be able to say, look, I need you there, right? It's much harder to say no to someone if you're actually talking to them in person. Yes, you can send a text, you can call them, but often they might just be like, man, what does the recruitment chair want? What does John want, right? So what does it look like to engage with people? But we'll stick around if you have any specific questions, but that is for us. Paulja, thank you for joining us and sticking around for an hour and a half. Myself, CJ, and Russell will stick around. If you have any specific questions, we can help you. But I am going to stop recording right now.